Have you ever felt the hairs on the back of your neck rise at the thought of what might be lurking just beyond the light? Well, today we take a journey into Drakensberg for an incredible discovery and then a first-hand account of a creature locals call the Mungwa. Are these stories mere legends woven from fear or evidence of something far more tangible and terrifying? Together, we shall find out. Welcome to Weird Encounters, a place where the ordinary fades into shadow and the unexplainable comes alive. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and become part of our ever-growing community of the curious. Now prepare yourself, because what you are about to hear is not for the faint of heart. I apologize if this message jumps around. My nerves have been on edge ever since I left the Drakensberg region in South Africa. I was part of a private geological survey team working alongside some local university researchers near the Ingisuthi area, just southeast of the towering Cathkin Peak. It was a standard enough arrangement, or so I thought. The government sponsored us, though not officially, of course, to map and sample rock layers believed to contain ancient fossils. I've always been fascinated by paleontology, so naturally I felt privileged to be there. But what we discovered was far beyond fossils or petrified dinosaur bones. The reason I'm sending this email is because of the thick cloud of secrecy thrown over everything we uncovered. It all started when our ground-penetrating radar flagged what we thought could be a cluster of large skeletal remains. At first, I joked with one of the team members, a friend of mine named Gert, that maybe we'd found the legendary monsters local folklore always hinted at. We chuckled then, like idiots who had no idea what was coming. Anyway, we marked the coordinates, roped off the area, and requested more advanced excavation tools from our sponsor, whoever they actually were. That's when about a dozen new workers arrived out of nowhere, presumably subcontractors. We'd never seen them before. They wore brand new boots, carried brand new equipment, and barely spoke to us. Only to each other. It was like they had some prior knowledge of what they'd find. My friend Lasidi, who is from nearby Pietermaritzburg, said she overheard them referring to the big guy in the rock more than once in their conversations. She told me, in an offhand manner, it sounded almost playful, but underneath there was a tension that set her teeth on edge. The dig didn't take long to confirm something massive was under there. We uncovered a series of bones that seemed way out of proportion to anything I've seen in legitimate paleontological literature. Humanoid, but not. The skull alone was nearly triple the size of an average adult human's, with a jaw that could swallow a melon whole. The tibias and femurs indicated something that would stand, if upright, easily over 9 or 10 feet tall, perhaps even closer to 12 feet, given the incomplete remains. Every time I pressed the new arrivals for some explanation, they'd shrug me off and mention that the local legends did talk about Inzuthu people, rumored to be giant ancestors. I'd never heard that particular legend, but I've since learned that various groups have stories of enormous primal beings. At first, it was awe-inspiring, thinking we stumbled onto definitive proof of giant hominids. Then, everything shifted. A few days after our initial find, 2 black SUVs with tinted windows rolled up near our base camp. They had official government plates, sort of. The plates looked somewhat official, but not quite matching standard numbering. That evening, a group of official-looking men, SAPs, or maybe some special government branch, approached our lead archaeologist, Dr. Thompson. She clammed right up about everything afterward. As far as I know, they threatened us with legal ramifications for disclosing anything we'd seen. I heard from a couple local hikers at the time. One was an older gentleman named Eben, who said he'd been coming to that region for decades because of strange lights and unusual voices echoing at night. He'd always thought it might be local spirits or something from old Zulu legends. Another time, a group of teenage campers scrambled down the same trail, saying they glimpsed a massive skull that looked too real to be a prop. They took a few pictures, but their phones mysteriously had no images the next day. They swore something had wiped their data. After that, strange men wearing unmarked uniforms started systematically clearing out any bystanders from the vicinity. I remember this one moment distinctly. We heard the rotor blades of a helicopter around midday, and suddenly the entire site was sealed off. My team was forced to relocate to a makeshift camp half a mile away. Our instruments, camera gear, even the GPR logs, they took them, whisked them away in large plastic containers. Nobody offered us any explanation. Dr. Thompson wouldn't meet my eyes. Gert approached me at one point and said in low tones that we should slip out that evening because he was concerned for our safety. Lasidi refused to leave until she had at least some proof, some fragment to show the world. So she smuggled out a few small bone shards, maybe an inch or two each in length. I actually saw them. They looked like hominid bone, but with a different texture and density from standard modern human bones. That's the last time I saw them. Lasidi disappeared a few days after that, right as we completed the assignment and were told to go home. I tried calling her, tried emailing. Nothing. Friends in Pietermaritzburg say she vanished without a trace, and the local authorities claimed it was simply a missing person case they had no leads on. The bigger the puzzle got, the more uneasy I felt. I tracked down rumors of similar finds in the area. Apparently, a rumored giant skull discovered in 1956 near the Royal Natal National Park. It was quickly covered up. Then again in 1977, there were whispers of an oversized skeleton in the Giant's Castle region. Each time the story ended the same. Official lockdown, site sealed, no official record. Some folks attribute it to local superstition, or natural illusions, or misidentification. But there's too much repetition, too many hush-hush visits by official sorts to be coincidence. When I reached out to an acquaintance in Johannesburg about it, a contact in the anthropology department, he was polite, but his words were that it's not wise to dig deeper. He mentioned the National Intelligence Agency has an interest in archaeological anomalies, especially if they can't easily be explained away. I figured maybe the government doesn't want to panic the public or encourage treasure hunters, but it feels far bigger than that. There's a sense that these remains, if made public, could rewrite something fundamental about human history or about other species that once roamed the earth. That's the gist of my story. I can't prove a thing anymore, seeing as they cleaned out our entire site and confiscated everything. I only hope Lasidi is somewhere safe. I hope those men in black SUVs don't come for me the way they came for the rest of the crew's data. I don't know how many people got threatened into silence, but if you folks want to know the truth about what's hidden in the Drakensberg, this is my contribution. Those are the sort of secrets that lurk beyond the tourist trails, beyond the brochures and guided tours. A whisper of giants, an echo of lost chapters in our history. Perhaps all it takes is one fleeting glimpse before reality itself shifts under your feet. But now let's listen to a story that whispers in the tall grass, of glimpses in the moonlight, and of a creature that belongs more in nightmares than on travel brochures. Brace yourselves. I think I've lost my mind. But I know what I saw, and so do the local villagers who've been telling these stories for generations. Let me just start from the beginning before my memory clouds over like it tends to do when I'm jittery. Last September, I took a safari vacation in Tanzania, planning to see the famous Serengeti migration. I'd saved up for years, dreaming of that classic scene of wildebeest and zebras forging across rivers teeming with crocodiles. It was a small group tour, just me, my friend Tamara, an older couple from Germany, and a few other travelers. Our guide, Jabari, was from a village near the Ngorongoro conservation area. He was a tall, quiet man, the kind who had a calm about him, like he'd seen more than he let on. The journey started off beautifully. We drove across dusty roads, eyes glued to the golden plains that stretched out to the horizon. Occasionally, we passed Maasai herders in their bright red robes, tending cattle under that endless sky. And then one evening, after we'd set up our tents in a designated campsite near the Morukopjes, Jabari told us about the local legends, the ones seldom mentioned in the standard safari itinerary. He said there was an elusive creature that local folks called mungwa, an enormous feline that was neither lion nor leopard. The older couple from Germany snapped pictures of him telling the story, but I recall him glancing over his shoulder every so often, as if checking for something lurking in the tall grass. He never outright said it was real, at least not then. Yet I sensed an edge to his tone that made the hair on my arms prickle. We spent a few days traveling deeper into the reserve. Every night, a small team from the local village would help us set up camp. One of them, a young man named Sefu, mentioned that people in his grandmother's generation lost goats, even children, to something they called the shadow cat. Whenever I pressed him for details, he'd look uncomfortable. He spoke in bits and pieces, referencing old folk songs that warned the children not to wander after dark. One particular night, this was near the Serenera area, I had a restless feeling. The daytime heat had been suffocating, and we all huddled around a lantern after dinner, sipping lukewarm tea. Tamara was updating her travel journal. I remember I was just about to turn in when I heard a low, growling sort of hiss from the blackness beyond our camp's edge. Jabari grabbed his flashlight and scanned the darkness. Nothing. But I swear every fiber of my being told me there was something out there, crouched just out of reach of the light. The next morning, we found tracks around the perimeter of our campsite, bigger than any leopards I'd ever seen documented in wildlife guides. The prints were rounder, deeper, and spaced in a way that suggested a heft beyond the typical Serengeti cats. Even Jabari, who was usually unflappable, looked rattled. He pointed to them, then pointed north, indicating the direction they trailed off. That day, we drove out to a local village on the edge of the park to resupply. Word must have spread that we'd seen prints. A few elders approached us under a large acacia tree, gently cautioning us that this was not a normal lion or a stray big cat. They told us it was the mungwa or the nunda, depending on which family's legend you asked. Some claimed it was a spirit, others said it was a flesh and blood creature that hunts alone, silent as a breeze. One elder woman, leaning on her walking stick, indicated that her own grandfather witnessed it snatch a calf back in the 1950s. She said it vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving only a streak of dark fur and massive claw marks in the dirt. I remember the villagers insisted we avoid certain areas at night, especially near thick patches of brush or rocky outcrops. Their stories varied. Some said the cryptid was enormous, with a smoky gray coat and eyes that glowed like embers. Others insisted it was almost black as midnight. Sefu came forward again, quietly recounting a childhood memory of hearing an unearthly screech behind his family's hut, then finding chicken carcasses scattered with no discernible pattern. He'd never forget the eyes shining in the darkness. A day later, we were returning to our campsite after an evening game drive when we saw something slink across the road. It was just beyond the glow of our Jeep's headlights. I couldn't get a perfect look, but it was definitely a cat, much larger than any leopard or even a big lioness I'd ever seen in zoos back home. Tamara gasped. Jabari slowed the vehicle. There was a second or two where this shape turned its head in our direction. The headlights caught a glint, like copper fire in its eyes, and then it disappeared into the tall grass. I can't adequately express the tension inside that Jeep. Nobody spoke for what felt like an eternity. The atmosphere had shifted into something primal, like we'd just stepped out of bounds. We pressed on. That night, I couldn't sleep. Tamara told me she heard rustling around the perimeter again, but I was sitting bolt upright in my tent, ears straining for any sound. Every time the wind picked up, I thought it was the creature breathing. At some point, the night quieted completely, a deafening kind of silence. It dawned on me that even the insects and night birds had gone still. By morning, I was ready to cut the trip short, and I'm not one to spook easily. The older German couple, though, seemed oddly curious. They wanted to see more tracks, perhaps snap a few pictures for their wildlife collection. Sefu, on the other hand, insisted that we should leave at once. He kept saying that once the Mengwa targets you, it follows you for days. His anxiousness spread to Jabari, who made some calls on his radio. He arranged for us to head toward the main gates of the park earlier than scheduled. I felt relieved, though disappointed in a way, because I'd wanted to see more of the wildlife in a safer context. On our way back, we heard an unsettling report from rangers that a Maasai herder had lost 3 goats the previous night under bizarre circumstances. No typical lion tracks, just strange, oversized paw prints. The goats were taken from inside a makeshift enclosure. Everyone was on high alert. Some rangers even muttered that the shadow cat had returned. Their voices had that unmistakable mix of dread and resignation that comes when you know there's a threat, but you can't confront it directly. I admit, I came home to the States feeling uneasy. I Googled everything I could about the Mengwa or Nunda, found a few references in older explorer journals, but not enough to satisfy me. It's almost like an open secret among some locals and a few travel veterans. But it's not something the tourist boards would ever talk about, that's for sure. Some folks claim the story is just an offshoot of local lore designed to keep children in line. Others swear it's a distinct species, maybe a mutation of a giant leopard, and still others whisper that it's a spirit, capable of crossing between worlds. I have no definitive answer. All I know is, I saw something that defied any normal explanation, and I felt fear in a way I never had before. Whether it's an undiscovered cryptid or a living legend, it's left an impression on me that lingers long after the safari ended. Sometimes I dream about those burning eyes in the dark grass. I wake up covered in sweat, half expecting to see paw prints by my bedroom door. That's all I can really say. Take it for what it's worth, but I believe there are mysteries out there that we're not meant to see until we stumble upon them in the stillness of an African night. Stay safe, everyone, and watch your backs if you find yourselves out in the savannah after dark. A creeping presence out on the sun-scorched plains, unseen but never quite absent. Is it just another tall tale shared around the campfire or something else entirely? Perhaps in the silence of the African night, under the brilliant spray of stars, a nameless creature still prowls the bushveld, waiting to be revealed. And so, another strange encounter fades away. A trick of the mind, or something far more unsettling. That's for you to decide. Thank you so much for watching my stories. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your support is what keeps this channel going.